In the present day and age, a movie in the cinema is never just a movie. In an age of universal streaming services, increased viewership on smartphones and home theaters, and of generally bloated Hollywood budgets, a movie one plans to see at the cinema is always a fractal and combined arms experience. It usually involves a trip to a multiplex or a mall, preceded or followed by a nice meal and some shopping and all the associated mall activities. And then afterwards, on the internet, it is followed up by a secondary universe of commentaries, review videos, and people creating careers out of contempt or love for various pieces of Hollywood media. All of these experiences are integrated, and at the date of recording, the 5th of July 2025, this channel is no exemption. Welcome everyone to the completely aimless, unplanned CM Kozeman banter review and commentary on Jurassic World Rebirth, the latest installment in the Jurassic series so far. And like millions of other interchangeable lives across the planet at the time of recording, I made a day out of seeing this movie, and the cinema tickets were really somewhat expensive. I mean, I remember living next to a mall with a multiplex years and years ago, and I could just go out and see movies with my pocket change, but that age is well and truly over. They really took an arm and a leg off of me, but I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that if you like this channel, if you've been following me for quite a while, please consider supporting me on Patreon and on the merch store. The links are in the pinned comment and in the video description, so at least I can make some of this ticket money back. And if you're one of the capture audience, you know, one of the people who have found out this channel through this video, welcome, weary traveler. Rest up your legs, kick back, relax and enjoy. And if you have no silver to give, please consider subscribing, clicking the goddamn bell icon, and maybe even leaving a comment. Those all help us, our meager flock of over 50,000 eccentrics on YouTube, gain some traction against the algorithm. So that's that. The shilling for shekels part is out of the way, and let me take a sip of the Kozeman coffee. And let's get cracking with Jurassic World Rebirth. Okay, the movie is called Rebirth, and I'm not gonna make any tasteless afterbirth jokes, okay? Because the original Jurassic World, by this stage in the movie universe, is actually dead. Now, if you rattle your memory, and I don't know if this happens to you, but it happens to me, there were 3 Jurassic World movies before this one, okay? And when I think back about them, I can't remember where one begins and where the other ends. They're extremely generic and, in hindsight, really bad films, and their details all bleed into one another in my memory. I mean, I remember Chris Pratt is in them, and this annoying corporate coded woman is in them, and in the last movie, out of desperation, they bring back the original Jurassic Parkers, Jurassic Parking, and showing our heroes how it's done. And by the way, that's a really annoying trope, the millennials coming out of the woodwork to show Gen Z how it's done again, and I really don't like this trope. But yeah, and then in one of the films there's a white mutant dinosaur, and then in another there's a haunted house, and in one of the movies there are exploding grasshoppers, and I think another movie has like a mutant raptor that's different from the big white creature, and one of them has Giganotosaurus as an enemy. And yes, maybe I'm getting old, but maybe these movies are so forgettable that their memories bleed into one each other like unholy memetic hybrids. when you think back at them. And this is all the more unfortunate because the last Jurassic World movie before this one came out in 2022, only 3 years ago. So to recap, that whole muddled series of movies are essentially dead. We will do a quick recap now to remember what happened in them. In Jurassic World, there was a new improved Jurassic Park with more advanced tech and shit and also hybrids, and it was essentially a soft reboot of Jurassic Park. Once again, something bad happens, the park runs out of control, dinosaurs break free and havoc ensues. In the second movie, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, our heroes return to the island to rescue some dinosaurs because a volcano is about to wipe out the island, and they hustle all the dinosaurs out of the island and take them to what is essentially a mix of a Japanese haunted castle kind of place and an extermination camp. And once again, there's an evil scientist trying to create hybrids and control the dinosaurs. There are these Indoraptor creatures, but they break out, chaos ensues. It's easily the most forgettable title in the franchise. And at the end, there's a clone girl, and she releases the dinosaurs into the world. So now the world has dinosaurs. And in the final movie before Jurassic World Rebirth, now dinosaurs are actually part of the world. They have somehow integrated themselves to the ecosystems of the world, and there's yet another controlled park somewhere in a mountain valley, and giant locusts, and the original cast of the Jurassic Park returns to, as I just told you, show the kids how it's done, and then they Jurassic all over the place, and it's a real clusterfuck, this last one. It's so messy and tangled and just weird. I think in 20 years or 40 years, people will be watching this movie just for its sheer weirdness and bad acting and bad and weird directing decisions. Mind you, Jurassic World Dominion is over 2.5 hours long and a lot of things happen. I mean, there's a whole side plot set in Malta with a creature black bazaar, and there are these memorable, cool, but ultimately disposable characters like this one hot Latina coded blonde woman with special pack dog attack raptors, and there's also this whole weird sequence with the flying exploding locusts, and it's just crazy and insane, and it leaves off at such a weird place that I can understand why now, at the point where we begin Jurassic World Rebirth, the original Jurassic World universe is now dead. Yes, everyone, dinosaurs were adapting to life all over the world, but it turns out they couldn't really make it. But they had a good run. It's sad, but they just couldn't survive in the world's different climate, and the claim goes the different oxygen levels, which if you are interested in paleontology and paleozoology, that's actually a weird and very controversial quote. Basically, there's a whole school of thought which suggests that dinosaurs could get so large because there was more oxygen in the atmosphere back then. Now, anyone who has studied dinosaurs or prehistoric oxygen levels or the world in general knows that this claim is almost certainly false. But yeah, in the movie, that is given as an excuse. They couldn't make it because there wasn't enough oxygen. The plants, the insects, the bugs, everything was different. And this latter claim is actually more realistic because if you think about it, the smallest unit of an ecosystem is the ecosystem itself. A disease can wipe out entire species. Animals need gut flora and other commensal creatures to properly function in their environment. They may not be immune to diseases which may have evolved after they became extinct. So yeah, this actually makes more sense. But yeah, you will be seeing many more weird scientific claims as the movie proceeds, okay? So most of the old dinosaurs are dead or they just couldn't make it. Rest in peace. The survivors have been relocated to sanctuary regions around the equator and shit, because apparently it's warmer there and there's apparently more oxygen. So into this world steps in Scarlett Johansson, the movie's protagonist. And I have to confess, before seeing this film, I was kind of fed up with Johansson as a sort of science fiction-y Mary Sue character. In a lot of movies, she was like the go-to female protagonist if there was something freaky or scientific going on. I mean, you just have to look back at the movie adaptation of Ghost in the Shell, where she stepped in for an Asian character. She was also the protagonist of Lucy, which was, I think, Luc Besson's worst movie of all time, where a woman, you guessed it, Scarlett Johansson, it really sounds like an insult. Listen to the synopsis, okay? A woman learns to use 100% of her brain and begins to develop supernatural abilities. And the acting is awful, the science is really awful. She gets so smart she can like phase between dimensions or develop some bat-like sonar or begins to fly. It was a ridiculous film. I think it hurt Scarlett Johansson's career too, that movie. Anyways, she was also the star of another indie sci-fi movie called Under the Skin, where she played an alien that blew men apart and melted them and I think drained their souls or something. And once again she had this sort of mysterious character which was like a parody of herself. And yeah, with a track record like that, not to mention the Avengers series and the tie-in movie Black Widow. Oh, and not to mention the voice of the cyber AI, artificial intelligence, in that one movie called Her. Remember that? The movie that eerily predicted something like ChatGPT. Yeah, so with that sort of track record, to be honest, I was sick of seeing this actress all over the place, and I really went to the movie with the worst expectations. I expected her to be lady bossing all over the place and stepping up to everything and saving everybody, and in that I was pleasantly mistaken. Only goes to show how much I assume, because actually her character was really well-rounded for the parameters set by this film. Scarlett Johansson doesn't stick out, and yeah, she does have some Scarlett Johanssonisms, but she actually comes across as an affable and likable character, like almost every other character in this film, which is a great achievement compared to the last few films in the Jurassic franchise, I can tell you that. So Scarlett Johansson begins as a cynical, jaded, secret missions, elite soldier kind of operator in New York. We hear in the story that she was in MARSOC, which is the United States Marines Special Operations Command, which is one of the most demanding military units to get into. Actually, there have been a few women attempting to qualify at MARSOC selection, but to this day, I don't think anyone has made it, any woman has made it. In fact, when women sign up to qualify for MARSOC selection, they actually make the news, and you can go and search for MARSOC woman news, and yeah, it's a big deal. So this is a very, very, very challenging military unit. I think like active military duty is very challenging for women in general. But yeah, Scarlett Johansson's character knows how this was done. She knows the drill. She actually suffers from PTSD and has moments of self-doubt and introspection. We actually see her crying during one scene, which is a really refreshing, emotional, human touch after seeing so many films in which many women, not just Scarlett Johansson, were reduced to playing paper cutouts and males' ideas of women's empowerment fantasies. So yeah, Scarlett Johansson is in New York, and we get this little side detail with the last living Brachiosaurus in New York City causing a traffic jam. And during that scene, there's also a little Easter egg with a school bus from the Crichton Elementary School in the background. You may have missed it. So obviously that's a hat tip to Michael Crichton, who wrote the original Jurassic Park and The Lost World. Anyways, Scarlett Johansson is contacted by this businessman kind of character who immediately reminded me of Carter Burke from the 1986 Aliens movie. And boy, my instinct was right because, well, you're about to see. Anyways, the guy tells Scarlett Johansson that he's got a special mission and they have to go to this dinosaur reserve near Surinam in the equatorial region. And don't laugh now, okay? Just try not to laugh. Their mission is to collect DNA samples from the biggest, okay, creatures on the land, the air, and the sea. I was half expecting them also to mention a fire elemental and an earth elemental. I don't know, it sounds so ridiculous. They want the DNA from the biggest swimming, walking, and flying dinosaurs because they want to understand how these giant dinosaurs' hearts work so they can develop a medicine against heart disease. So boomers can live 20 years longer and keep sucking up the world's wealth and torment the generations that come after them. And this detail is so ridiculous and so over the top that I actually appreciated the screenwriters for the way they integrated it into the film because it kind of sets the parameters for how you are going to enjoy the rest of the movie. So you understand that this is going to be a movie with a mission. Don't think so hard about it, but prepare to be entertained. That's that. And just don't think so much, okay? If you don't think so much, you will be pleasantly rewarded. If you think so much, you'll just have a bad time. I mean, certainly don't wonder about the possibility of these animals all being clones created in a lab, supposedly. And why would the company not have access to their DNA from the get-go? Why do they actually need to go and stick needles into like giant living animals to be able to get this? Just don't think about it. Yeah. Oh, and speaking of labs, shit, I almost forgot. The movie actually opens in a lab, okay? It opens 10 years ago in the process of the building of the second Jurassic Park, which was Jurassic World. And you see all sorts of scientists with like weird astronaut gear and over-engineered pieces of equipment hard at work creating hybrids for some reason. There's a Triceratops with 2 heads, some weird twitching animal with wings. You're gonna see more of that later. And there's a danger section with special doors that open and close, okay? And this first scene is almost out of the Final Destination series because in this genetic freak containment electric boogaloo lab, one of the characters is happily enjoying a Snickers bar, as you would in a level 4 biohazard containment area, okay? And he's just lazy. He just dropped the Snickers bar wrapper to the floor, but he's done a bad boo-boo there because you see, this is a special lab where the doors of the containment area for some reason have vacuum cleaners built into their leading edges. So as they move, they suck things up and they accidentally ingest the Snickers cover wrapper. Don't laugh. Okay, and a Final Destination type of accident occurs and the big dangerous mutant they were keeping breaks loose and creates mayhem, and that's like our premonition sequence in which we get introduced to the awfully named Dilophosaurus Rex, which is this movie's primary mutant antagonist. But yeah, okay, so screw that. You don't need that now because you're gonna see Dilophosaurus Rex soon enough. Let's go back to our heroes. So the slimy businessman guy talks to Scarlett Johansson, offering her one last mission. And they also bring along this nerdy dinosaur guy who until recently used to work at a natural history museum, but is now out of a job because the world's population has gotten used to dinosaurs, and forget dinosaur parks, not even natural history museums are making a profit. Boo-hoo. And if you know anything about natural history museums, that's just flat out impossible. For a couple of reasons. Usually, these museums are state-sponsored, and we know it from our world already that natural history museums never fail to attract a crowd. But yeah, maybe I'm thinking too much about it. And also, I have to make this side note that this profit motive begins to look more ridiculous with every further Jurassic Park movie. In the earlier Jurassic World film, there was an evil park manager guy who was creating hybrids because, the customers were growing bored of the dinosaurs. So you need to keep the customers entertained. Are you not entertained? So in order to do that, they would create all these monsters, which I don't think makes a lot of sense. But yeah, just don't think about it. Long story short, bish bash bosh, slimy corporate guy gets Scarlett Johansson, gets the treasure planet Atlantis, the Lost Empire, Titan AE, the naturalist in Master and Commander coded, sexy, shy, introverted, passionate, nerdy guy, and builds a team, and off they go, bish bash bosh, to the tropics to retrieve this Pokemon dinosaur DNA. I still can't understand. Couldn't they have sent small drones to get the blood from these animals? But yeah, then we would have no movie probably. And I also admire the fact that this movie dove straight into the action. There was no deep story or another backtrack connection to what happened to the park or the original characters. None of that. And actually, this is really, really refreshing because the Jurassic World series was getting really tangled up in its own coils. But here, we just meet our characters, and in less than 10 minutes of runtime, in a shorter time than you have been listening to this podcast so far, they are on the way to the tropical zone, which is in Surinam, a Dutch-influenced country on the shoulder of the South American landmass. And in this movie, Surinam is a kind of Star Wars-like place. Everything is built on water with quays and boats all over the place. That's possibly because they shot those sequences in Vietnam. And there are weird dinosaur skulls everywhere. They keep tiny pteranodons in cages. And in one scene, we see fishermen hauling ashore a Dunkelostheus, which is a cool but also a hilarious and thought-provoking mistake. So, okay, get it. In this movie, the premise is they clone all these animals from mosquitoes extracted from amber, right? Trouble is, Dunkelostheus, that fish you see the Surinamese fishermen hauling ashore, lived and evolved in the Devonian age. And back then there were no mosquitoes. So I don't know how they got the DNA for that one, because it's an unmistakable pre-Mesozoic organism. But if you kind of play with their rules, maybe there's more to this universe than we get to see. Now, there is a concept called environmental DNA or eDNA, and this is basically the art of recovering trace DNA from an environment. You see, animals, who would have guessed it, are very messy. They drop hairs, they sweat, they snooze, they deposit all sorts of miniature cells as they walk about a place. And in our current day and age, researchers can sample the soil or water runoff or even puddles to get hints of which animals inhabit a certain ecosystem. And there have been interesting discoveries made this way. For example, the Sumatran rhinoceros is an extremely rare, almost extinct kind of rhino that lives in the Malay archipelago and surrounding regions. Now, in the past few decades, the populations of this rhino have been crashing and it's likely extinct in the wild. But in 2023, they did an environmental DNA study and found hints that this animal might still be living in a few places where people thought it was all but extinct. So in the Jurassic universe, perhaps during the construction of this new Jurassic World park, they pioneered a new technique, a new technology in which they bypass the mosquitoes in the amber entirely and just somehow do some ultra-sensitive microscopy research on the sediments and the stones themselves and are somehow able to extract bits of fossilized environmental DNA. That is actually less preposterous than just showing a Dankylosteus on screen. And the screenwriters could have just consulted a few scientists or a few eccentric science-interested people like yours truly, and just one line from one of these characters. And don't get me wrong, I mean, in Jurassic Park World... Okay, I'm just gonna call this movie Rebirth from now on, okay? So in Rebirth, once you accept that the characters are gonna be a little two-dimensional, they actually drop some really nice lines of dialogue. And you would only need to say the corporate guy or the paleontology guy saying like, before it closed down, Mamdani's team were pioneering eDNA extraction directly from fossil sediments or something like that, and that would have grounded the whole world in a more believable paradigm, and it may have opened new possibilities for future movies, because once you get the suspension of disbelief for just cloning animals straight out of the strata without the need for dino DNA precisely preserved in mosquitoes and stuff, then you open the possibilities for all sorts of fossil animals being cloned and returned to life in this way. And I'm just spitballing here, but a future Jurassic movie written with that kind of caveat might include some gigantic unknown predator who left no fossils, saying like, oh, it's the Extractus Rex. Nobody knew where it lived. We don't have fossils, but we have the DNA. And now they brought it back. Something like that. And that would have been really, really cool. But anyways, back to Surinam and our characters. So yeah, Surinam in this universe is a kind of Star Wars-like place with all sorts of weird ecological trespassers from beyond time, adding local color to the place. I actually think they could have gone a bit further with that element. There could have been creatures that mutated, got mongrelized, and became adapted to coexisting with animals on Earth or other ecosystems. I mean, there could be small theropods running all over the place like monkeys in an Indian temple, or it could have been a smaller scene. Imagine they're flying there and in the port they see all the dolphins, and among them you have plesiosaurs skipping. They are not enormous plesiosaurs. I mean, a lot of these animals were quite small actually. They're almost the same size as the dolphins, but they kind of coexist, and it's like a weird offsetting uncanny detail of background natural history like that. And a character could have explained it saying, oh, look at them, these are mongrel plesios. They're getting all the more common now with global warming and stuff, you know. Not all dinosaurs perished. Some adapted and some thrived. And then maybe Scarlett Johansson could have quipped in saying hybrid ecosystems or something, and it would have been really cool and a really nice dash of color. Because this is how nature actually operates. I mean, I will give you a familiar example. Most of you would probably know of the story of the cane toad in Australia, alright? Now, this is a toad from South America, And the British really run a massive trans-global empire in which they managed enormous ecosystems or mismanaged them like some sort of transplanetary colonization effort. But yeah, one of the things they did was planting sugarcane in a lot of their colonies because it's a cash crop. But in Australia, there was a bug that was eating all the sugarcane. So they just imported a sugarcane bug-eating predator from South America, the cane toad. Now, as you probably know, the cane toad got out of control, became an invasive species, decimated a lot of local species, but it also changed and mutated too. To such a degree that at the crest of the sugarcane toad expansion into mainland Australia, now scientists are observing something called pioneer morphs. These are different from sugarcane toads in South America or shoreline Australia. They actually have longer limbs, they can run rather than hop, and they are like pioneer precursors. So it's an actual story of life finding a way and adapting to changing ecosystems. I wish they could have slipped in a few more details into that Surinam sequence in Rebirth. But anyways, they get to Surinam, it's a weird and exotic place, and they meet Remy from the House of Cards series there. The actor's name is Mahershala Ali, and his name in the movie is Duncan Kincaid. But yeah, to me, this guy will always be Remy from the House of Cards TV series. Anyway, so this guy was a friend of Scarlett Johansson's, and they were in MARSOC together and had a lot of military adventures. And like her, he's also softly suffering from some sort of PTSD, and he has his team there, including a jacked up serious British character who's more lethal and mission focused, and two French speaking mercenaries, probably from New Orleans. I don't know their deep lore, but yeah, these guys obviously are just there to add a little color before an animal can eat them in an interesting way that does not derail the plot. And yeah, they meet everyone, the team is assembled, and they don't really waste a lot of time with these sequences, so it's good. And off they go in a militarized PT boat to hunt their Pokemon, I mean dinosaur DNA, including the Mosasaurus, which they can track with their tracking device. Don't ask how. Their plan is to get the Mosasaur DNA from the sea and then move up to this secret island and then get the other two DNA samples from the, oh my god, the biggest land dinosaur and the biggest sky dinosaur. The whole motif of the crew assembled in the PT boat conducting some high-stakes piracy reminds me of this one anime series called Black Lagoon. And like this movie, it's got a cool and deadly and PTSD-stricken ex-military lady. The character's name is Revy, that's R-E-V-Y. In that anime, the captain of the boat is also an ex-military African-American guy, and I think his name was Dutch. And there's also a nerdy, out-of-place character, and his name is Rock. And I'm sure this did not escape the people who were writing this script. There are strange splices of DNA from other cultural works in the Rebirth movie, and I think the Black Lagoon anime series is one of them. If you like this sort of thing, give it a watch. You won't be disappointed. Alright, man, it's been half an hour. If you've been enjoying my banter, I would be really happy if you could consider supporting me on Patreon too. Let me take a sip of coffee. And I think we need to accelerate a bit because it's been over half an hour and I'm still talking about the first act of the movie. So they go out and chase the mosasaur, and it's actually a really exciting scene, made more exciting with the inclusion of some Spinosaurs. So yes, somehow the mosasaur, which is the size of a blue whale, has teamed up with the Spinosaurs and they go out on hunting patrols together like some weird medieval map sea serpent navy. And this sequence was actually really nicely made. Nothing you see is accurate. The mosasaur is the size of a blue whale and it's got throat grooves like a blue whale and armor like a crocodile. And the Spinosaurs there's something off about them, yet still it's nice to see a swimming Spinosaurus on the big screen. So all the pedantry goes out of your head when you watch these sequences. They're really exciting and well filmed, and this is one of the good things about this Rebirth movie. Now, halfway through the chase, we are introduced to another bunch of characters. You see, a recently divorced dad has taken his 2 daughters and the eldest daughter's stoner, useless boyfriend on a sailing trip from South Africa to Florida, I think. And actually, yes, there are a number of Americans and Brits who get to do this stuff as a hobby, and I really respect them. So it's, that kind of like a boat and family kind of guy who just happens to be there. They are attacked by the mosasaur and the spinosaurs and they are shipwrecked. And our heroes hear their distress call and they decide to help them. So they kind of team up and then they go chase the big mosasaur together and get the DNA. And I think this is like another symbiosis. I think there were 2 different scripts and the writers did their best to smash them up into one hybrid script. I mean, hybridity is woven into the very DNA of this film. So it's like a 2 story in one kind of debacle. And even when our characters get stranded on the island and they have to manage to survive against all the terrestrial dinosaurs, the stories of this family and our bounty hunters are told in parallel arcs. They only get to meet in the final act of the film. And, well, what can I say? The director actually did a decent job of integrating these 2 stories together, so it's not really that disturbing. And as I told you, once you switch your brain halfway off, you really enjoy the rest of the film. The story arc of the family has some really nice points to it. You see, for example, the eldest daughter's boyfriend starts out as a lazy, good-for-nothing stoner asshole, but when real danger threatens, he is the first one to jump into the sea to rescue her. And call me old-fashioned, but I really like these scenes when they appear in any movie. I think in any kind of story, basic heroism and camaraderie and standing up to rescue others, these are nice things to watch. They don't need to be super complicated. You don't need to have a traumatic backstory or a flip the narrative bullshit. Sometimes really good old heroism and good old family values really work in films, and I think the family arc in Jurassic World Rebirth was really good in that respect. Anyways, so our heroes crash land on the island, and one more interesting thing about this movie I noticed then is how action figure coded all the characters are. And if you compare this movie with the original Jurassic Park, obviously in all the films, characters dress in a way that makes them immediately recognizable. In the first Jurassic Park, Grant was blue, Ellie was red, Malcolm was black because he was an agent of chaos, and the godlike, fatherly Dr. Hammond was white. But these were all very subtle costume choices, and the way the characters dressed and carried themselves was more natural because maybe Spielberg was at the helm, and also all the costume directors and directors of photography in the 1990s had this godlike and now extinguished talent in which they could somehow make the film seem very real with all the details, but also beyond real. And now that magic has gone away. Now, as far as production values go, everything is just beyond real. And I got to see this when our heroes crash landed on this island. They survive a shipwreck. And I kid you not, even as they clamber out of a sunken boat or avoid falling from a cliff or something, all the characters, especially men, their shirts are tucked into their pants, they have watches, they have like an article of jewelry, a necklace or something that immediately lets you know who they are. Same with Scarlett Johansson and same with the family. They are very action figure coded characters. And this may have been disturbing if the movie was badly written, but actually in Jurassic World Rebirth, you kind of get to accept this and just enjoy the ride for two reasons. One, I think despite all the convoluted storylines, the film is actually very, very well written. And number two, the creatures, even the mutants as we're about to see, are very well designed and very well articulated. And you just get to tolerate the chaff in order to see these lifelike dinosaurs on the screen. And on that note, I'm just gonna press the accelerator pedal now. Vroom vroom, and just focus on the creatures in the order with which they appear, and let's get to the bottom of Jurassic World Rebirth that way. Number 1, the swamp creatures. So I think these are the most mysterious creatures in any Jurassic movie. And once again, when you see background characters like this, you kind of think like, how the hell did they clone this? Because as our heroes are wading inland through a swamp, you see something like an endless tentacle stretching through the swamp, and it brushes past Scarlett Johansson's leg and scares her, and that's that. There's also a Goombie giant newt character, which looks exactly like one of those terrestrial present-day newts, but it's actually bigger, maybe the size of a monitor lizard, but it's like rubbery and it's got a sail on its back and its tail, and it doesn't look like anything you know from natural history, maybe with the exception of this very strange drepanosaur called Hyperunector. That is Hyperunector. Hyperunector. Well, but even that doesn't really compare. You see, it's got a similar fleshy, loby, sail-like tail, but Hyperunector's forelimbs and head are strangely bird-like. And yeah, this is a complete oddball, by the way, so go look that up. Hyperunector. It would have actually been great to model this creature instead of this weird unknown newt number 5 for that creature, but yeah, what we see is what we get. And as for the endless tentacle in the swamp, I think it was cut from something bigger. Maybe they had a different scene written in which you kind of saw what this thing was, and maybe our heroes fought against it, but yeah. No such luck. Once again, hats off to all those diligent geneticists who cloned like all sorts of weird background creatures to inhabit the island. I think that's really ridiculous. I mean, at this point it would make more sense to have a time portal rather than some genetic mumbo jumbo in the series, but yeah, it is what it is. Number 2, Dolores the Aqualopes. So this was actually a really cute character. Aquilops is a ceratopsian dinosaur, kind of like a protoceratops but smaller and in some perspectives cuter. The Aquilops we see in the movie becomes the little girl's pet and companion. You see, I told you, if you haven't watched the film, I told you there was a whole family arc with the divorced dad and his 2 daughters. Well, the older daughter has the boyfriend to keep her company, so they give the younger daughter a kind of adopted pet. And I don't understand, because this island was where they keep all the mutants, the freaks, and the most dangerous animals, apparently. And I don't understand how this cute rat-like creature survived among all those vicious predators, but yeah, just don't think so much. Or maybe it survived because it was so small and unassuming. Maybe the meek really get to inherit the earth. So yeah, this animal is really well animated. Maybe it doesn't look exactly like the fossil of Aquilops that we know, but yeah, you kind of have to get used to this by now. And it's a really well animated, really well designed, really cute creature. It is realized in 3D animation and as a puppet. And it's really cute and adorable. And it doesn't do much else. You know, you expect maybe towards the end of the film for this creature to like warn our heroes somehow or find a way through a tunnel that lets them escape. But yeah, no such thing happens. It just sits in the girl's backpack and becomes cute and adorable and serves as some sort of cutesy relief. And that's okay. I would hate for this animal to get hurt in the movie. So that is that. I think they almost wanted to name it Dora, but they couldn't. So they could have made a Dora the Explorer joke. Because the young girl, once again, the Rebirth movie is all about cross-media hybridization, okay? And the young girl is very Dora the Explorer coded. She is, well, I think Latina, and she kind of looks like the Dora the Explorer cartoon character. And she has a backpack, and you know, maybe the Universal Studios team really tried to license that name, but they didn't let them use it. So it was Dolores instead of Dora. And I think this character is gonna sell a lot of toys in the coming months because, as I told you, these movies are not just movies anymore. They're an entire spectrum of consumer experiences. And one final point about horned ceratopsian dinosaurs in general, okay? All evidence we have indicates that these were extremely brutal, dangerous, and aggressive creatures. Just because they were plant eaters does not mean they were peaceful herbivores. And in reality, if we could time travel to the past and have seen a creature like, well, Dolores the Aqualopes, I think that would be just a mean, nasty customer. It would snap at our fingers. Aquilops probably was a juvenile, so as an adult it could have grown up to 2 meters or more in length, maybe. And believe me, you would not want to meet the parent. Now, look, if you've ever been around a parrot, you know, you see those things are like flying pliers, and if you piss off a parrot, it can easily chop a person's finger off. Now, even the smallest ceratopsian dinosaur had a parrot-like beak which was the size of a Rottweiler's jaw or something. So they would probably be really angry and aggressive creatures to be around, and you would not want to meet them. A territorial ceratopsian could mistake a human being for a weird, dangerous theropod and attack you and kill you just out of spite. There's a famous fossil of the fighting dinosaurs, a Protoceratops tangled with a Velociraptor. And everybody assumes that it was the Velociraptor which was attacking the Protoceratops. But if you look at that fossil from a different perspective, maybe it was just the Protoceratops having a bad day and taking it out on this Velociraptor. Because you can see in the fossil, the Protoceratops seems to have crushed the Velociraptor's chest open with its beak. And yeah, those are just scary, scary animals. And that's the last I will say about Dolores the Aqualopes. So let's move on. Number 3, Velociraptor. Well, the famous raptors from the previous Jurassic World movies return in the most unlikely sequence. You see, when this family group, the divorced guy and his daughters and the older daughter's boyfriend, they're having a rest and they're having to sleep in the jungle. And man, it is an eventful night because in the same night, the young daughter meets the Aquilops ceratopsian, and while everybody is sleeping, she's like, "Oh, you're a friendly one. Come here, you're my pet now. You're cute." Yada, yada, yada. At the same night, without being aware of this event, the boyfriend says, "I'm gonna go pee now." And it's the most American thing ever. I mean, only Americans are like this. Why? I don't know. If you know, let me know in the comments, but okay. Here's what he does. They're in a dinosaur-infested island full of predators, and they have barely survived several life-threatening adventures just hours ago, okay? And the guy has to go pee. Now, this is, once again, the most American thing ever. He goes off to pee, out of sight. My man, you are in a survival situation. I would have just urinated in my pants and just gone on there. Who the fuck cares? But yeah, this guy takes a little nocturnal hike. I mean, he wanders off like a few hundred feet or a few hundred meters away to find a place to pee where he won't feel bad about exposing his penis. I don't know. And while he's peeing, he gets stalked by two velociraptors, the model of which is actually the same from the previous Jurassic World movies. But suddenly, there's a plot twist. You see, as this guy is about to pee, a flying, even more dangerous creature attacks the raptors and kills one of them, and it's just ridiculous. It is an obvious rehash of the badass creature getting killed by an even more badass creature trope, the likes of which you saw in Jurassic Park 3 actually. If you remember that movie, the T-Rex makes an appearance, but in 5 minutes he gets his neck broken by an even more badass dinosaur, the Spinosaurus. So the audience knows that the ante has been upped and there's a new badass in town, and that's exactly the role the poor velociraptors serve in this movie. They're about to stalk and attack this kid when the flying mutadons attack them and kill them. So we know that there's a new, more sinister, more badass danger in town. But more about the mutadons later, and it's au revoir, Velociraptor. Number 4. Titanosaurus. So this is the iconic dinosaur for this movie, and it's an original design, a great big sauropod with extraordinary colors, enormously long, gravity-defying tails that they use like tentacles, and strange fish-like spikes on the back of their necks and backs. And despite looking so outlandish, the scene in which they appear is a really magical, touching, and expertly animated scene. You really forget the two-dimensional characters, the improbable plot twists, and the improbable raison d'etre of the entire film, and just experience a little bit of the same fascination you felt when you saw the brachiosaurs walk out of the lake in the very, very first Jurassic Park movie. Of course, it's impossible, I think, to replicate that feeling entirely, but this is as close as you get. You see the Titanosaurus in embrace. They're obviously loving each other. There's a male and a female, and they're a couple. They stroke each other's bodies with their long tails, and yeah, there's no way that thing could work out physically, but you kind of forget that because the animation is very good and the music is very touching, and our heroes collect their sample without much trouble. And that is the Titanosaurus. Despite not being quote-unquote realistic, I really liked this creature's design. And to tell you the truth, in actual sauropod dinosaur evolution, there are some species which make the Titanosaurus of Rebirth look tame in comparison. For example, there was an armored and spiked sauropod known as Augustinia, and its back was decked out with probably some pretty big and almost stegosaur-like spines. Further, extremely weird neck spikes also evolved in species like Bajadasaurus, that's Bajada saurus, and Amargasaurus. These guys were really strange, and in some cases their neck spikes resembled the horns of ceratopsian dinosaurs. Some sauropods like Saltasaurus had actual body armor, while others like Omeisaurus and Shunosaurus had tail clubs at the end of their already very long tails. And just one impact from one of these weapons could probably tear a small theropod apart like a rag doll. And there were stranger forms still. There was something called Icysaurus, which had these long, almost gorilla-like forelimbs and very short hind limbs and very, very strange box-shaped neck vertebra. We only have fragmentary fossils, but what we have is already very puzzling, and we don't exactly know what this last Icysaurus creature looked like, but some reconstructions are like some weird reptilian avian hybrid of a giraffe and a gorilla. So all of the little details that make up this composite titanosaur in the film were present in one sauropod species or the other, and I think the fossil record still has some amazing surprises waiting for us as far as sauropod diversity is concerned. Sauropods were more than just big gray animals with long necks, and I think if you're not interested in this issue already, the Titonosaurus in Jurassic World Rebirth should really prompt you to delve into the depths of sauropod diversity. So there. Number 5. Dilophosaurus. The famous spitting Dilophosaurus makes a cameo appearance after Jurassic Park, the original film, and one of our characters encounters it scavenging a dead Parasaurolophus. By the way, that's the only time we see a Parasaurolophus in the film, and it neatly fulfills the stock dead ornithopod, which is only there for some predator to feast upon niche. And yeah, one of the predators that feast upon the dead Parasaurolophus is the Dilophosaurus. It appears just like it did in the first Jurassic Park movie, except that it has the crest clearly visible as two wing-like folds of flesh extending back from its neck. It approaches one of our characters who's studying the scene and makes its sounds and gets the fuck away because, you guessed it, a bigger predator is lurking on the side. Well, about Dilophosaurus, what can I say? I generally love medium-sized, semi-obscure predators like this. I think they're far more charismatic and interesting to study than actual giant theropods, and seeing one is always a treat. And I think this is also another Jurassic movie trope, by the way, because in Jurassic Park 3, you had this small scene where a quote-unquote Ceratosaurus makes an appearance. And if you don't know what Ceratosaurus is, it's a predatory dinosaur with a nose horn, but they just cloned a T-Rex model, made it smaller and redder, and added a small nose horn in that film, and I think it's become a Jurassic movie tradition to have little cameo appearances like that. So yeah, move on and let's look at what the Dilophosaurus was actually scared of. Number 6. T-Rex. Obviously, it can't be a Jurassic movie without a T-Rex in it, and this movie is no exception. But I will say that Rebirth has the best T-Rex apart from the original and, in my opinion, only two real Jurassic Park movies. That is to say, Jurassic Park and The Lost World. The T-Rex we see here is a real breath of fresh air after all those hyper-fixated, roaring, cartoonish renditions in early movies. We see it as it is sleeping at first. And in that scene, every breath the animal takes is accompanied by some really great sound effects and Foley effects. And in the cinema, you really feel that you are in the presence of a giant sleeping monster. As the T-Rex sleeps, the family is trying to steal a boat from next to it, and it really feels like how mice would feel, scramping about in the dead of the night while us people sleep in our bedrooms. So really, really good rendition. I really wonder if the scene of the sleeping T-Rex was inspired by this one scene we had in the book, which I wrote and co-illustrated with John Conway. That is to say, All Yesterdays. You probably know this book if you know me and if you're following this channel. But yes, in 2012, we wrote a book about hypothetical and realistic views of prehistoric life with my good friend John Conway, and later on Darren Naish also joined us by writing the book's introduction. And in that book, John Conway has a great painting of a sleeping T-Rex. It's not running anywhere, it's not chasing anything, it's not killing anything, it's not screaming its head off. It's just sleeping like most normal animals do most of the time. And I cannot prove this, but I'm certain that the directors, or at least some of the concept artists, knew about All Yesterdays and John's painting in it, because where else would you see a sleeping T-Rex? When the T-Rex is chasing people too, it's also very naturalistic. It doesn't run like a crazy, insane person, but it actually steps carefully over rocks because, well, an animal that size could really hurt itself if it fell. And when it's chasing our heroes, it actually dives into the water with a little aquatic or subaquatic sequence, and it's just amazing to watch. Forget about the script's inconsistencies once again. You really feel like you are there, transported to the past for a short time. And that's that for T-Rex, a really nice and incredible scene that I think, alongside with the Titonosaurs and the Spinosaur attack sequence, really saves the film, you know? And one other minor note, this T-Rex in Jurassic World Rebirth seems to have iguana scoot type scales on the sides of its lower jaws. If you've ever kept a pet iguana or seen one at a zoo, you will know what I'm talking about. And I think it's this movie's way of making the Rex stand out. Also, a lot has been said about this T-Rex being the same T-Rex as those in previous movies. I'd like to believe so, and I think at this point in the evolution or devolution of this franchise, your belief is as good as anything they put in this script. So yes, I want to believe, and the T-Rex was really nice. Number 7 and 8. Quetzalcoatlus and Aneurognathus. So while our family is escaping the T-Rex in the lowland river place, the military gang, the Black Lagoon gang, goes up to the mountains to collect their final Pokemon Dino DNA from Quetzalcoatlus, the biggest flying pterosaur there ever is. The setting of the Quetzalcoatlus is almost as strange as the animal itself. Our heroes climb into some inaccessible rocks and then rappel down from them to access this creature's nest. In that sequence, we see that the area is crowded with Aztec or Mayan type ruins, and one of the characters I love it when this happens, okay? Sometimes in books and movies, characters just talk to themselves and say out of place things just to enlighten the viewers about what is going on. And in this scene too, somebody says, "Oh, those are like ruins there, maybe some ancient ruins up on those hills or something." And I think this was a design decision because the name Quetzalcoatlus is derived from the Aztec name of Quetzalcoatl, which was a flying serpent god. And the film designers obviously wanted to honor the animal's name with such a Mesoamerican architectural theme. It's not really truly explained in the movie, but I think the Quetzalcoatlus nest looks that way because it was planned as a tourist attraction and as part of the park rather than as an out-of-place Mesoamerican ruin. But yeah, my guess is as good as yours. Let's talk about Quetzalcoatlus itself as it appears in the movie. Now, at the time of recording, we understand Quetzalcoatlus and related giant pterosaurs to look like extremely tall, long-necked, stork-like animals with relatively enormous heads. And the version that appears in the film is like a coarser, more reptilified and slightly more color-coded version of our contemporary understanding. It's got some hairs near its head like spikes, but the overall vibe of the animal is an unmistakable flying reptile. And our heroes go up to its nest and collect, instead of blood, they collect some yolk from its egg, which is, I guess, as good as blood if you're trying to make boomer heart medicine out of it. Yeah, don't think too hard about that bit, alright? And in there, Scarlett Johansson and the sexy, hot, introverted, shy paleo boy have this exchange saying that, what if we make this medicine free and available for everyone? And Scarlett Johansson says, yeah, but what about the money? But she seems to be having second thoughts too. Anyways, they harvest the goo from the egg and get out of here. There are some misadventures and some hair-rising sequences involved, but the Quetzalcoatlus essentially looks like a fantastic creature, and when I was watching the battle scene with it, I did not get the same goosebumps as I got from the T-Rex or the Mosasaur. So make of this what you will. There's also another pterosaur, and we only see this for a brief sequence, and it's Aneurognathus. Now, in real life, Aneuragnathids are very small pterosaurs with frog-like mouths and very hairy integument. I think they occupied the same ecological niches bats do in the present day. We only know around a dozen species, but I think if bat diversity is anything to go by, there must have been literally tens of thousands of Aneurognathid species in the world's distant past. But the Aneurognathus we see in the movie is a green, gooby frog boy type of creature. It's very cute and green, but it's decidedly reptilian. It's basically a flying frog. And well, we just have to take it as it comes. Just assume that maybe they used too much frog DNA when recreating that one. So on we go. Number 9, the Mutadons. I think Universal employs a really developmentally challenged special person just to come up with the names they give to these mutants. I think this person, he or she, is set up for life. They have a comfortable salary to live a middle-class life forever, and all they do in exchange is that they see the pictures of these mutants and they come up with really simple but really catchy but also somewhat annoying, sorry to use this word, but retarded names for these mutants. I mean, the guy already wrote fire when he said Indominus, and then there was Indoraptor. And now you got the pteranodon-like things that are mutants. So the name obviously is Mutadon. All the jokes aside, I think these are the best mutants in the series. The Indominus and the Indoraptor creatures were too generic and they were basically like bullshit dragons. And as you're about to see, the Distortus is, well, really distorted, and it's a lazy attempt at creature design. But the Mutadons, they have character. They have these beady little skepsis eyes and these long pointy faces and these inflatable wattles beneath their chins. And the design is otherwise very congruent and consistent, so much so that they look like creatures which evolved somewhere. They don't look like mutants, because in these Jurassic movies, the mutants always have this disposable, trashy look about them. They are ugly, and from that you infer that they are evil. And obviously you could not have people gunning down dinosaurs left and right, because this is a family movie, and actually a lot of the messaging in the Jurassic World Rebirth focuses on the sanctity of life. In one scene, the paleontologist guy is talking with the army guy about shooting dinosaurs, and he says it would not just be illegal but also immoral and a sin to kill dinosaurs. And the soldier bro says, well, what if it's a life or death situation? And then the cute nerdy guy says, well, we're the one intruding on their property or something like that. And don't worry, the soldier guy gets eaten by a Spinosaurus for his arrogance at self-preservation later on. So yeah, this is a lot of the messaging in the movie. That life is sacred, it should not be bought and sold, it should not be wantonly extinguished. And I think the mutants are there because you can forgive yourself for being happy when they're killed. You know, it's just a fucking mutant, just kill it. Well, I mean, what is natural in this movie? Has a mutant not eyes? Has not a mutant hands, organs, dimensions, senses, affections, passions, fed with the same food, hurt with the same weapons, subject to the same diseases, healed by the same means, warmed and cooled by the same winter and summer as a natural dinosaur is? If you prick a mutant, does it not bleed? If you tickle a mutant, does it not laugh? If you poison a mutant, does it not die? And if you wrong a mutant, does it not seek revenge again? The villainy you teach them, they will execute. So yeah, the Mutadons meet our heroes in the final chapter and chase them through what is essentially a reboot of the kitchen sequence in the original Jurassic Park. But because of their weirdness, there's something almost like a horror movie with this sequence. Our heroes arrive at this park, but through some wonderful technology that doesn't fail for decades, this park still gets power at night. So come nightfall, everything turns on like a spooky, magical, haunted theme park. It's almost like that scene in the incredible Studio Ghibli animation, Spirited Away. If you remember that film, the characters in there arrive to basically an abandoned theme park, but at night suddenly all the lights turn on by themselves and the theme park becomes a haunting ground for ghostly visitors. And the vibes in this final act of Jurassic World Rebirth is very, very, very similar. Well, as I told you before, this movie is all about cross-hybridization with different intellectual properties. I think there's even a similarity to Five Nights at Freddy's with this Mutadons and their sequence. If you don't know what that is, Five Nights at Freddy's is a horror game with these uncanny valley dolls, these animatronic doll-like characters. And in the film, as the Mutadons are hunting our protagonists in the abandoned supermarket of the abandoned theme park, there's this little bit, it's too easy to miss, but there's a kind of animated, advertising toy. It's like a little toy dinosaur with sickly glowing ruby colored eyes, and it says, "Why don't you try the new chocolate bars?" or something like that. But because this place has been left abandoned for 2 decades, it's kind of broken too, so the sounds play in slow motion. And the Mutadons attack the toy by mistake, and I think that's a deliberate reference to Five Nights at Freddy's. So yeah, this kind of horror extravaganza. And because they're mutants, at the end, Scarlett Johansson grabs a pistol and fucking shoots one dead and just fuck it, I guess, huh? But yeah, it was a kill or die sort of situation, and true to her MARSOC training, Scarlett Johansson did her best. And it was only a fucking mutant, so who the fuck cares, huh? Yeah, despite that, the death of the Mutadon also felt a little disturbing too. But I guess it would be more disturbing if he had eaten one of the protagonists. Anyways, that's that for the Mutadons. Actually a really interesting design and probably the only relevant mutant in the franchise in my humble opinion. Number 10. Distortus Rex. So what can I say about this incredibly badly designed creature? It is easily the worst mutant in all of the Jurassic movie series, but it also contravenes some basic facts we know about vertebrate anatomy. You see, the Distortus Rex is more than twice the size of a T-Rex, almost built like a sauropod. And it carries this weight on 4 large limbs. The hind limbs kind of look like generic, longish, rabbit-footed Jurassic Park dino limbs. And the 4 limbs are a cross between a gorilla and a therizinosaur. It's got these grasping clawed feet that can also walk on its knuckles. But it also has a pair of tiny arms hanging from its chest. So the Distortus Rex is essentially a functional hexapod derived from a tetrapod body plan. Now the problem with this comes from the overall way that limbs and nerves interact together in an organism. There have been numerous monstrous 6 or 8 limbed animals recorded in history, but in all cases these were examples of fused twins. So when you have something like a hen with 4 legs, the 2 extra legs dangling from its butt are parts of an unformed embryo that is somehow joined to the main creature through the hip. And in all of these cases, the extra limbs are just dead weight. They don't interact with the nervous system of the animal. They sometimes twitch about, but the animal can't really control them. And even if the nerves were somehow miraculously joined up with the spinal column and the brain, the animal probably would lack the necessary parts of the brain to accutate and control those limbs. To draw an analogy from the world of computers, the freaks of nature we see with 8-legged cows or 6-legged chickens and stuff like that have the hardware but don't have the cable connections and decidedly don't have the software needed to run them. But apparently the Distortus Rex is such a successful freak of nature that it has no problem in that respect. It can walk about really gracefully and hunt and even attack helicopters. So it's really an overachieving sort of freak. It's really an undinosaurian and unvertebrate-like body plan, and maybe because of that, the Distortus Rex caused a lot of debates and uproar when it was first revealed before the film was shown. Many people, myself included, thought that it was a really bullshit design, and because of this creature we were really worried that the movie was going to be disastrous, even worse than all the previous Jurassic World installments. And thankfully, on that front, I think we were proven wrong, but still the counterintuitive nature of the creature is a real eyesore. I think the director of this movie, Gareth Edwards, kind of did it as a hat tip to his earlier work on Star Wars movies. This guy obviously likes these hulking Walker type vehicles and the Rancor creatures in earlier Star Wars movies. And even before the Star Wars installments, he directed a movie called Monsters, in which some multi-limbed giant spider-type aliens had taken over parts of Mexico. So I think he just really likes multi-limbed creatures and had to put one in Jurassic Park. Well, the thing with Distortus is that it has 6 limbs. What is stopping these scientists from creating something like a functional dragon? You would just turn 2 of the 6 limbs into wings, and the other 2 would just be hands and feet, and hey, maybe if things keep going this way, the next Jurassic World movie could be Jurassic Park, The Land of Dragons, or Jurassic World, The Rise of Dragons, or some shit like that. You know, nothing is impossible at this point. But yeah, more about Distortus. The very first scene of the movie is actually a revelation and a setup for this creature. And we see this lab with all those freaks, these 2-headed Triceratops, the prototype Mutadons and all that stuff. And true to this movie's tone of cross-media hybridization, this reminded me of the famous Alien 4 film made in 1997, where cloning also plays a big role. And in this movie, the scientists try to clone Ellen Ripley, played by Sigourney Weaver, from a DNA sample, but her DNA is fused with the DNA of the alien creature inside her. So there are a lot of failed clones, and there's a very memorable scene in this movie where the clone Ripley, who we thought was the only one until this scene, walks into a lab and sees a whole batch of failed clones, and they all look horrible. Some of them have mashed up heads. One of them is actually still alive, and it begs her to kill her. And in a really dark and memorable scene, one of the most memorable scenes of the entire Alien franchise, by the way, the clone obliges, and it's a really dark and horrible scene. And that whole revelation setup with the Distortus kind of reminded me of that bit. To be fair, the Distortus could have ended up as a far worse and far schlockier creature, but here we must really credit the screenwriter David Coeb, who actually wrote many classical sci-fi films, including the original Jurassic Park and the follow-up The Lost World and Steven Spielberg's War of the World, and also obviously the director Gareth Edwards, and they really did the best they could do with this Distortus creature. We rarely get a full glimpse of it, and when we do see it, the soundtrack, the camera angles, the lighting, and the overall mood of the scene always makes us understand that this creature is something profane and something that should not be. And in this, I am reminded of this one sequence in the original novel of Jurassic Park, written by Michael Crichton, which is really a whole other ball game. You know, it's a completely different story from the Jurassic Park movie. In the book, there's this almost satanic sequence where the entire park has gotten out of control. All the animals are breaking loose and killing each other, and a lot of the protagonists are also dead. Surprise, the Jurassic Park book has a lot more deaths in it, and it's a far darker and bloodier book. Alright? So pandemonium ensues, and we also get a far clearer understanding that the animals in the park are not dinosaurs or even clones of dinosaurs, but they are actually completely new and unnatural things created out of some dino DNA, but a lot of genetic filler from frogs and other creatures. In essence, they are ultimate hybrids and closer in spirit to the mutant creatures that appear in the later Jurassic World movies, okay? So you got that down. And as the island is going crazy, an entire nest of Velociraptors is found, and they move on to the beach in order to escape the island. And when they're on the beach, Grant notices that the Velociraptors are lining up in a strange and weird way that doesn't make sense. It's a staggered alignment of adults and juveniles, and there's one female matriarch. And Grant wonders, where did this instinct come from? Because these sure as hell are not natural dinosaurs or even natural animals, but somehow this emergent behavior is forming there. And when you read this sequence in the book, it's towards the end of the book. I don't remember the page at the moment. But when you read this bit, you kind of get this dark, scary hint that maybe some dark force from beyond is controlling these essentially soulless animals. It's not a direct claim, but the vibe is there, the feeling is there, and it's one of the many little dark and mystifying things that make the Jurassic Park book such an exciting and original read. Anyways, you get this sense of something unnatural and maybe even unholy when you're watching the Distortus creature. And yeah, ultimately at the end it's a relentless monster that brings our heroes together. Surviving the Distortus and surviving the Mutadons unites the plot lines of the Lost family and Scarlett Johansson and her army buddies, you know. and it is what it is. But it could have been a lot worse, and that's how the movie ends. A helicopter approaches to rescue our heroes, but in the final second, the Distortus eats the helicopter, and then somehow they survive and run away from the Distortus. One of the heroes, played by Mahershala Ali, appears to sacrifice himself, but it's a nice and welcome plot twist when we learn that he survives and everybody goes back to get him, to rescue him. This was also a repeating plot point, by the way. The mercenaries change their mission to rescue the stranded family, and at the end everybody turns around to rescue the stranded mercenary from the jaws of the Distortus. And remember the evil slimy capitalist guy? Yes, he gets all the DNA, but fortunately the Distortus kills him, and our heroes agree to open source the life-extending boomer heart disease medicine that they will make out of the Pokemon triad of dinosaur DNAs. Actually, only one of those things is a dinosaur. Two if you're broad-minded, but the Mosasaur is a lizard, the Quetzalcoatlus is a pterosaur, which is an immediate cousin clade of Dinosauria proper. So if you're broader, you can actually extend your understanding of Dinosauria to include the pterodactyls, and yeah, out of these only the Titonosaurs were proper dinosaurs as we know them. But anyways, they combine all the DNA, and this drug is open sourced, and once again we learned that life is too precious to give up on, and life is too precious to sell by numbers. And that's how the movie ends. But this podcast is not over, because if you've been following this channel for a while, you know that with all of these movie reviews, I have this one final section where I try to remake or re-envision that film with a hypothetical unlimited budget. And if the god of Hollywood came down to me and said, CM Kozeman, and I would say, yes, God, how would you save the Jurassic World franchise? Here is what my idea would be. I would call this film Jurassic World Deep Time, and it would be a total, complete, and utter reboot. In this movie, there would be no mention of genetic technology or genetic engineering. Instead, it would be a series of experiments with time portals. In essence, the movie would resemble this other great 1990s sci-fi film, Stargate, by the way. And the government is experimenting with time portals, alright, to the distant past. But in order to calibrate their machine, they need to learn what time exactly the portals open up to. And this is when a team of paleontologists and soldiers are brought in. Their mission is to go through this portal, collect animals, and conduct actual scientific studies and pinpoint the exact date to the million year. And then our heroes would go through the time portal, and the second act of the movie would be a protracted series of animal chases and actual biological, ecology-based paleo science research. They would actually study all the plants, try to narrow down the epoch they are in, and remember, the age of the dinosaurs was very, very, very long. The first dinosaurs were further away from the last dinosaurs than the last dinosaurs are to us, so try to wrap your mind around that, okay? So our heroes are collecting plants, maybe photographing dinosaurs or other creatures, or trying to measure corpses they find or make and try to sequence their DNA, trying to get to grips with this world, because the past is a whole other planet. And I would have my movie really drive this home. I would hire a crack crew of dinosaur autist enthusiasts, and you really can make a popular movie that also conveys the science to mass audiences without salting it up with bullshit. If you made such a movie, the audiences would actually react really positively, but you just have to write it in a proper way. So imagine our heroes are in the jungle and they get attacked by a Ceratosaurus, and there's a chase scene, and at the end one of the soldiers actually kills this dinosaur. So in the reprieve, the paleontologists study their skull and compare it with actual fossils we know from today, saying that this is Ceratosaurus, and we're probably somewhere between the Kimmeridgian and the Titonian ages. These are the actual names of the subdivisions of the Jurassic period, by the way. Between 154 and 143 million years ago, okay? Even a dinosaur as distinct as Ceratosaurus has a broad distribution that's more than 10 million years wide. Let that sink in. But as our heroes are collecting specimens and trying to narrow down their time region, a disaster happens, the portal gets shut down, and they have to journey to a certain geological coordinate where they know a rescue portal will open regardless, but they have to be there before 3 days are over, okay? Something like this. So it's a race against time and survival, and maybe some intergroup drama among humans too. Maybe there's someone trying to betray or backstab people. Maybe there's a love interest between the nerdy paleontologist and the hot soldier woman, or maybe the nerdy paleontologist woman and the hot soldier guy. How about that? And throughout this frantic journey, they encounter many dinosaurs, including some very well-designed hypothetical mega predators or herbivores, and you could hire somebody like me to design them, ha. And at the end they reach the site and there's one final misadventure, and maybe one of the researchers sacrifices himself, staying on the other side of the portal, telling them, don't worry, I'm already home, I'm far happier than I could ever be in the present day, you guys go. So everybody escapes. But then there's a plot twist. You see, they conduct a fossil dig around where they left this other guy, and for some reason they can't go back. And it turns out that distinct traces which they know they left there are not there. That's really interesting and more than a little scary. So it turns out that every trip to this so-called past is actually a journey to an approximate parallel universe, but not our universe, Maybe it's a parallel universe that's exactly like the past of the world, but maybe the color of one flower is different, or an air current blew one way and not the other. So you can never really know where you are. And that also opens up the possibility of tangent evolutionary universes and maybe some speculative evolution adventures for the rest of this series. Jurassic World Deep Time Total Reboot by yours truly, C.M. Kozeman. Alright, that's almost that for the review, everybody. It's almost been an hour and a half, and thank you all for having the patience to stick with me. And if you listen to me this far, please comment saying, I want a total reboot. I want a total reboot. I want a total reboot. Comment so that I can tell the real G's apart from the quitters, so that game can recognize game. And once again, I thank you for your time. But what did you think about the movie? Please let me know in the comments. I really need you to do everything so we can get some more traction against this goddamn algorithm. And if you also listen to me this far, please know that I am doing this entirely out of the goodness of my heart, so a little support on Patreon or the merch store would be really extremely welcome. So that's that, everybody. That was my big ass Jurassic World Rebirth review. A surprisingly good movie, but certainly not one of the OG Jurassic Park movies. I think there are only two original Jurassic Park movies, Jurassic Park and The Lost World, and anything after that is some weird sort of doujin kind of fun fiction. But yeah, I will keep watching these movies as long as they keep hitting the screen, and I really wonder what they're going to think of next in order to flog the dead horse that is this franchise. Because there's only so many islands and so many parks and so many genetic experiments you can visit over and over again that, well, somewhere something drastic needs to be done. That's all I'll say. And that was that. Thank you for listening this far. I hope you enjoyed Jurassic World Rebirth, and I hope you enjoyed this podcast, and I love you all. Goodbye.